Welcome to the Relationship Blueprint, unlocking your power of connection. After 40 years of working with individuals, couples, and families, I have come to the conclusion that at the heart of most problems is a relationship that just isn't working. Join me in discovering why relationships fall apart, how to reconnect, and how to build deeper and more meaningful connections. I will invite fascinating guests to help us explore your questions about relationships. Let's get started. Today, I am honored to welcome our guest, Maureen Brine. Maureen is an amazing person. I took some notes. Maureen has been with Intervention Canada since its inception and is a highly respected expert in the field of addiction, recovery, and relationships. With over 35 years of experience, she has conducted hundreds of interventions and has profoundly impacted families, communities, and individuals, as well as organizations. So thank you for your service to the recovery community. It's challenging work.
That is for sure. And rewarding work, too.
And rewarding. Maureen is not only an international addiction specialist, but an advanced Imago Relationship Therapist, educator, couples counselor. She is on the faculty of Imago International Training Institute, and I have been fortunate enough to assist Maureen in a training she's working with Iran now. I was honored to do that, and it was a wonderful experience. Also, she's been in private practice since 1985, working both in Vancouver and Toronto. She is a sought-after global speaker, workshop presenter, and amazing trainer. As a former director of the Donwood Institute in Toronto, Maureen's focus is on addressing addiction and strengthening relationships through Imago therapy. She brings a deep understanding of family organizations and recovery, working with the entire family to create lasting change. And what I know about that is that the road to recovery is sometimes a lonely journey, and including the family makes all the difference in the world. With her own experience as an adult of an alcoholic, Maureen has made it her mission to highlight the role families play in addiction dynamics. She believes that interventions are a true gift of love, a guided heart-to-heart conversation that can set the stage for recovery and healing for everyone involved. Maureen, welcome to the Relationship Blueprint. Unlock your power of connection.
That's so sweet. Thank you, Coco. I feel honored to be here as well. And thank you for inviting me. And I hope we'll do maybe many of these over the years. I think it's so important to talk about recovery and recovery in Imago. So I'll say a lot about that today. I come well qualified to talk about addictions and recovery. As you said, I am an adult child of an alcoholic father who did get into recovery, which was a blessing. And I'm also the mother of a son in recovery. And he's coming up on his 7-year medallion in February. And I couldn't be a prouder mama if I tried.
7 years.
Yeah, can you believe it? I know. Just when I thought there was no hope, he pulled it together. Yeah, I'll start out by quoting him. We do talks together periodically. It might be fun to have us on here sometime, actually, the two.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, it's fun. And one of the things that he said at his first year medallion was, he likes to say, I'm here because of my mother. But more than that, he says, I'm here because she was the only person that never gave up on me. And I felt like I was about to lose the only person in my life that's loved me. Right? And so that was pretty profound. I mean, he now knows the love of his father, which is great. I'm on a journey right now of writing a book. It's called Recovering Hearts. Yes. Oh, I guess I didn't tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah. So I'm a couple of chapters into it at this point and loving it. But basically what I'm looking at is recovery through a relational lens. And I think that's where I'd like to start today. As you said, I've done 10 seasons of Intervention, the TV show Intervention, which is now on A&E. And the reason that I did that show was for the families. What my book is about is that most treatment centers, addiction counselors, hospitals, therapists, and 12 steps included, and I'm a big fan of 12 steps, as you know, they operate primarily out of the individual paradigm. And I think that is too bad. I mean, I think that they get that when a person develops an addiction, they become self-absorbed and they move away from all the people in their life. And recovery has to be about giving up the addiction and returning to people, right?
Could you just pause there for just 1 second? Because I feel like our listeners, the idea of an individual paradigm approach with therapists and 12 steps and treatment centers, et cetera, that you've named, think that it would be good to help clarify that for our listeners because they may not understand that.
Yeah, what that means. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I do think that, beginning with AA way back when, right, that Bill and Bob got that someone, in order to recover from an addiction, has to give up the addiction and return to people. And so that's largely the way our systems are set up, that, someone gets into recovery, they go to maybe a 12-step meeting or they go to treatment, but they're treated as an individual rather than looking at the whole family. And in particular, if there's a partner there, including the partner in the treatment program. At best, partners and families may get a 1-week program somewhere, like a treatment center. But the focus is on getting the person with the substance abuse into recovery, into treatment and recovery. The focus is on the individual, not the whole. That includes their family. And that certainly was the case with when my dad got into recovery. I mean, I was working in the field of addiction already. And, basically they offered my mother a 1-week program, and that hasn't changed very much in the last 50 years. And what we know in Imago is that we're born in relationship, we're wounded in relationship, and we need to heal in relationship, right? So typically the coupleship has been ignored in recovery. And I think my story is that Bob and Bill did not know what to do with spouses. So they formed Al-Anon. And, typically what happens is the person suffering from addiction goes one way with their treatment program and recovery. And then the partner goes their way with Al-Anon or family program or individual therapy. And the couple grows apart.
Yes.
And so you hear so much in the first year of recovery that the partner feels widowed to the recovery program of the substance abuser.
I think when you're saying abandoned, I think what we might want to elaborate on is that people in early recovery are going to meetings sometimes twice a day. Yep. And that the partner that's at home and even maybe the children feel like we lost dad to the booze, but now we've lost him to those people.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, right? And there's no doubt that support is needed. And so what my book is about is getting the couple, and particularly the couple, the pair bond into recovery together as soon as possible. And that's not instead of what someone might need individually. But the best resource for healing is that pair bond, is the couple.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what Imago is all about. That Imago is about, we heal in relationship, and that, the person in recovery needs their partner to be on that healing journey with them.
Yes. And Maureen, what I would say about the 12-step meetings so often is that people that are new in recovery are struggling, yes, to stay sober, but also like they feel a sense when they're in the room safe, and they relate and talk to the people in the rooms because they feel understood. And then when they go home, they feel misunderstood. And that doesn't mean that the partner isn't understanding, but how can you possibly put your arms around a disease that you don't really know how they got there, how it works? And also, if you've heard this a million times, I bet if I gave you $1, you'd be a millionaire. But, this idea, if he really loved me, or if he really, my children, he would. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what happens, I think, is the partner lags behind because they're not getting support. Yeah. Right. So the person who's in recovery is, learning all about their addiction and learning about, what's underneath the addiction. And I think that's important to say. And the partner's not getting that kind of help. So they start lagging behind, and the two of them do not connect.
And when you say lagging behind, can you elaborate on that?
Well, they're not getting the same kind of education or emotional support that the person in treatment is getting.
And sometimes the personal growth that's happening when somebody stops drinking, it's almost like they're growing up, and they're growing up fast. And they're developing a relationship with their higher power, and they're all, what do they call it? The pink cloud. When people are so joyful, they finally feel better and they finally have hope. And their poor partner, they're kind of like, well, how do I know this time is going to work? And what has really changed for me? A lot of dynamics there.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics for sure, right? And it is hard to be hopeful when you've been through years of the addiction growing and growing. So I think it's critically important that programs like Recovering Couples, for example, which I think is bigger in the US than it is in Canada, but it's growing here, where couples can actually start doing something together in recovery, right? And so one of the things that I did when I was one of the directors at the Donwood, was I was in charge of a lot of programs there, but I created a program for sort of an early intervention program for couples where one or both of them were addicted. And it was actually an intensive outpatient program where they came 3 nights a week to the treatment center together. And they'd have a lot of things together and then some groups separately. And they did that for 3 months. And then they were followed up for weekly for a year, and then every other week for the second year. And what happened was the recovery rates of those couples soared through the ceiling, way above the norm in recovery. And so much so that the Minister of Health came to see me and my staff and looked at what we were doing, and they decided to fund the program, and they made it retroactive to the beginning of the program. They gave us 3 years worth of money because the recovery, well, I knew back then what I know now is that, couples who recover together stay together.
I love that. Couples that recover together, stay together. And when you're talking about this recovery program and you named it, is that the Recovering Couples Imago workshop, or is that something different?
It's something different. It's actually a bona fide 12-step program. So it's like AA or NA or Al-Anon, and it's called Recovering Couples. So yeah, and they go through the 12 steps together, right?
Is that popular in the U.S. at all? I've never heard it.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Wow. So if you're in a couplehood and one of you is in recovery, you may really want to Google that and find out more about it. I'd like to learn more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's slow to catch on for some reason, but I think it's because we're so used to the individual paradigm. Let's look at each individual, right?
Yeah.
So Imago does have Getting the Love You Want workshop for recovering couples. Myself and a team of people created. It is the Getting the Love You Want workshop. The regular one it's been amazing. It's been around since the early 90s. Life-changing, game-changing.
Life-changing for sure.
Absolutely. The one for recovery is more geared towards recovery. It's called Recovering Our Connection. We can look at addiction through the developmental lens, and that I do think that most addictions are the result of attachment issues. Right?
I agree.
Yeah. And, most of us, and this is the Imago belief, as you know, most of us come out of childhood with our parents having done the best they know how to do. But most of us didn't get some significant needs met that still need to be met today, right? And that we need to get those needs met by our partner, by someone who reminds us of our parents and our unmet childhood needs, right? And so I think that Imago and recovery are like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the recovery language and Imago language is very similar, right?
I was very fortunate to have 12 steps and Imago at the same time, which made all the difference in the world in my life. The interaction between the two, leaving the individual paradigm to the relational paradigm. But I absolutely attribute that combination to my long-term recovery.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, they fit together hand in glove, right?
They do.
And that really an addiction is an attempt to shore up the needs that we didn't get met. And I love Gabor Maté, Dr. Maté, Gabor Maté. He's a Canadian addictions doctor. I know you know him. And he is awesome. I mean, he just says, don't ask why the addiction, ask what's the pain underneath.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What's the pain underneath? And what purpose is the addiction serving?
Yes.
The thing that's so incredible is that the path to addiction works well to shore up what's missing, right? It works well at the beginning.
Tell us more about that.
Well, I think that, we come out of childhood with a lot of anxiety and dysregulation, right? Then to chemically alter or, some of the process addictions like eating, gambling, or shopping, but surely that can't be an addiction, shopping.
We need our own 12-step for that one, Morgan. But we need to go now. That's too fun.
No. And so, people, there are innumerable fillers that initially work well with anxiety.
Yeah.
Drugs, right? Or gambling or eating or drinking. They work well at the beginning, but then as it becomes a problem, they no longer work.
Yes.
So an addiction in my mind also is an attempt to regulate oneself, to regulate that anxiety.
We sometimes in the layman's term call that self-medicating, right?
Self-medicating. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And
when you're feeling a lot of anxiety, do anything maybe to make it stop or not have the feelings that you have and to push them down with something or put them aside with something, because something outside of you is where you go, at least from my explanation of this is instead of reaching for the person and that attachment to someone that you trust because you haven't had a lot of experience with that, the beverage or the drug or the gambling fills that place, right?
That's right. Yeah, and so that people reach out to that instead of their personal relationships. Right? Yes. And I really last year, I guess it was last year, maybe I don't know, the years all go together, but I guess it was Joe Hari, who's a little bit controversial. He's I think from Europe, but he's got some really interesting things to say about addiction, right? And the thing that helped me with my son was towards the end of his addiction career, we'll call it. Now he's a recovery coach. He's got a healthy career.
Wow, that is amazing. So somebody 7 years ago who was about to lose everything is a recovery coach and others. It's so beautiful.
I'm very proud of him.
I know you must be. You must be so proud of him and maybe of yourself because you stuck with it. You stuck with him.
Yeah, I did. And it was challenging at times. I persevered. That's the word I use a lot, right? And I used all my skills and still I went down the rabbit hole with him. It was hard not to. I couldn't stand the fact that he wasn't eating and he looked terribly, looked deathly ill and, just was very painful. And I was tired, frustrated. And I was reaching the end of my rope, actually. And we sort of reached that at the same time, which was a blessing, right? But there was a little video that really helped me. It's a 5-minute video, and it's just got words. Nobody's talking. And it's called The Root Cause of Addiction. And when I watched that video, I realized that I was so hurt and so angry with him that I wasn't even talking to him nicely half the time. The phone would ring and I'd be like, oh, no, not now. And, Scott was saying to me things like my husband was saying, you realize every time that phone rings, you jump, right? And I said, yeah, I know. The ambulance is going by and I think, is this it? It's not easy to live with someone who's suffering from addiction or to be involved in loving somebody. But that little video at the end of it, he says that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. It's connection.
How perfect.
And when you think about that, that really helped me. And that really, once we need to treat people well, even if they're using, it doesn't mean we put up with it.
Yeah.
But we need to at least talk to them with respect and empathy and understanding, that this is an affliction, and that helped me. That really helped me to realize that, true, genuine connection is what heals. And
so you were in this desperate state and highly reactive, knowing that the next call could be it, that you were living in fear. And then you see this video, this 5-minute video, and you realize that the opposite of addiction is connection. And
not sobriety, it's connection.
It's so wonderful when these light bulbs go on for us. They don't happen all the time, but boy, when they do, we're so grateful. You have this epiphany, really. And then what did you do next? I mean, how did you shift everything in your world so that you could be healthier to help him?
Well, I'm very blessed to have a lot of friends and family and support, although I did take a lot of heat from people that just said, listen, you need to let him go. Let him go, kick him to the curb. I mean, I had people actually say that to me, just kick him to the curb. How do you kick your kid to the curb? So I had a lot of support for me. But I think when I watched that video, I started talking to him differently. I was warmer, kinder, more understanding, but I still had my boundaries. And then, he was just continuing down the rabbit hole. And I finally, one day I said to him, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. And I texted him and I said, I can't watch you die. You can't ask me to do that. I love you. I'll always love you, but you know what to do. I'd sent him to treatment twice. He'd been involved sort of on the edges of 12-step programs, therapy, all of it. I said, you know what to do. And in the end, I had to say to him, don't contact me until you have your butt in a treatment bed. That was 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon. And I was out with a close friend of mine, and I was shopping for some workout clothes. And I just happened upon a T-shirt, had great big bold letters, like really big letters. It said blessing right across the front of it. And I thought, I could use a blessing. Honestly, I could, right? And so I said, I'm buying that. I don't usually wear things that are like, big letters like that. But so that was at 2:00 in the afternoon. By 6:00, he was in a detox.
I have chills all through my body. Wow.
He never looked back.
That took a lot of courage. Someone might be listening to this who is struggling with addiction, and God bless you. I really hope that you'll seek help, because there is such a better way of life, but you don't know it when you're in the act of addiction, because that thing that you take is the only thing that you have to cope with the things you don't want to deal with. So if you take that away, how will I live? What will I do with my life? And then from the parent end, it's so painful, as you described what you went through with your son, and you got that courage, really to say no more, and I love you, but I'm letting go.
And what he would say is, I didn't know that it was impacting my mother that much. I didn't know that she was starting to feel sick because of it. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. The funny thing was that blessing T-shirt, right, became quite significant because he went to one of his first NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous. Someone took a picture of him standing in front of a stained glass window in the church, and he had his arms open, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was a beautiful picture. I said, I'd love to have that picture. It's gorgeous, right? So I met him for lunch a couple weeks later, and he had it as his screensaver on his phone. And I said, that's great. What have you got written across your screen? He said, Mom, it says blessed. Right. I nearly fell off my chair. I mean, I'm funny that way, but I said, he had no idea about my blessed T-shirt. Right. So that became very significant. And we both would tell you right now that we feel blessed. Right.
Yeah, you certainly are.
Yeah. Blessed. And I think that's possible for people. I'm on a mission to really open up the community to the power of relationship, the power of connection.
And it's so interesting because so many people, as you said, in the 12-step community have had such early wounding around attachment, but then even throughout their life, because of that wounding, they've had a lot of unsuccessful relationships, people who have betrayed them, people who have taken advantage of them. And so even coming into a 12-step meeting and, wondering, like, are these people really this nice? Are these people really going to help me? Why are they doing that? What's their agenda? So much a trust to be built. But when you said how the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's connection, I'm thinking about how the people in the 12-step community embrace the newcomer and how that initially, that connection is certainly maybe unfamiliar, but so like I can breathe here.
Yeah, and they're treated with respect.
And treated with respect and understanding.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think that 12 steps have that. They know that the addiction needs to be replaced with community. And that's right. It's right on target. They just need to take it another step.
Yes.
Taking another step to the relationship in addition to what's already happening.
I think that people, like you said, going to Al-Anon, I feel like they're taking that extra step. They're going to their meetings, but as you said, this part that's really missing is helping that couple reconnect in a new way and build that trust back and all of the things that can happen in couples work, especially when it's directed in the way that you're describing around this recovery time. Isn't there a statistic about how many couples break up after recovery? I know the divorce rate goes up.
It's higher than the norm. And I think that's why. There's so much damage that's done during the addictive years, right? And then the relationship is not getting the attention it needs, right? Mm-hmm. And they're going off in different directions, and then there's nothing left, except disconnection.
And we don't know how to repair the relationship after the hurt. We all will hurt one another. Even the healthiest relationships, we're going to do that, right? But right. We as adults, most of us don't know how to then repair the hurt. And so lots of hurts happen. And especially, as you said, after initial recovery, then all of those hurts are wide open.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I like to say about childhood too, that, it's not so much that what happens to us in childhood, it's the lack of repair around what happened in childhood. It's the same in adult love relationships, right? It's like, it's not so much what's happened, but it's the lack of repair.
Yeah. So, Maureen, when you think about what you went through, what you learned, what do you say to our listeners? What do you tell the parent, the wife, the child of the addict? Where should they begin?
Well, that's a good question. Where should they begin, right? And I guess the answer is to begin with themselves, to make sure that they reach out and get the support they need, and to not give up, keep trying. I do believe in the intervention process, whether that's an unofficial intervention, where you keep trying to talk to the person about the drinking or using or behavior, and doing it from a vulnerable place, that this isn't just the problem of the person who's developing an addiction, right? It becomes a family problem. So to reach out for supports, to take care of yourself, to try not to enable, which is hard. So what I like to say on intervention is, and I say it on every show, love needs to have edges. Otherwise, it's just whooshy, right? So love has to have edges. What I realized with myself was that I had developed a pretty high tolerance for really inappropriate behavior, right? And that one by one, I started setting boundaries. One night he hurt himself and he wouldn't go to the hospital. I took care of his wound, as every mother would. And then I did head injury routine on him all night, and I said to him, I'm not doing that again. I'm just going to call the ambulance and let them deal with you. I had to set boundaries, and with love. So,
yeah, I think that's the hardest part of all this is when you love someone and they're in an active addiction, eating disorder. When someone you love is going through that, you said to keep going. Don't give up on the person. You used the word that you used was perseverance and setting boundaries. Like it's not one or the other. It's both, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the partner or the family member should not be put down because they love their addict. And forgive me for using the word addict. They should not be put down for that, right? Because it's love. In my mind, it's love that's going to win out in the end. Right, that through the haze, the person can see that you actually love me, because they don't love themselves. Right, my son at the end did not love himself. He became unrecognizable to himself too. Those wounds run deep, right, and it's not personal, and that's hard. That's hard, especially with things like sex addiction. I work a lot with people who are sexually acting out and their partners. That's tough, and it takes time.
Hard to not take that one personally, right?
Very hard not to take it personally, right? Very hard. Yeah. And I think to reach out for therapy, it's like Imago therapy, right?
When you're saying reach out for therapy, I think it feels very important for us to highlight that not just any therapist. We're licensed social workers, we're licensed professional counselors, we're LMFTs. People have lots of letters, but you really want somebody who understands addiction. And I think that going to someone who doesn't could even maybe do some damage unknowingly, but keep you in that individual paradigm and you take care of you. And not that we don't take care of ourselves, but that separateness message is really an interesting one, but not very healing.
No, I'd like to really support what you're saying. Traditionally, the thing to do would be to kick the addict out, get out, and that was certainly true with interventions. It's like, no, someone has to want help before they can receive help. That's not true. I don't know too many people who develop an addiction who don't want help. They just don't know what to do. And as you said, they're so attached and bonded to whatever the addiction is, it's hard to leave it. And so sometimes we have to lead them to the help they need. And that's where something like an intervention comes into play, where it's done with love. I love you. I think you have a problem. And here's why. And here's how your problem is impacting me, without shaming people.
And so the person's already suffering from shame because they thought they could figure this out. They thought they could kick this thing themselves. And then when they can't, and they look around at what they've created.
Yeah, it feels surmountable.
If you're a parent or spouse of someone addicted, how do you avoid shaming? How does one make sure that they're really not going down that road? Because it would be easy to do. You want to lecture, you want to tell them how you could do better, you do this, you do that. But I mean, we know it's ineffective. So how do they stay out of that cycle?
Well, that is very, very challenging. I mean, I found myself doing that. So it's trying to find compassion. I believe it's a disease. It becomes a brain disease in my mind. I have friends who would disagree with that, and they're trying to medicate their pain. So let's get at what the pain is all about. Let's try and help them find the help they need. And to see it through the lens of nobody wakes up one day and says, okay, now I'm on the path to becoming an addict.
Right.
Actively chooses that for themselves, right? And that they need help and to have compassion around that. At the same time, protecting yourself.
And I think it's interesting when people relapse, there's so much then shame dealt out about their relapse. They have enough shame themselves. But if they could just look at it, like I've told many people, when someone has cancer, and they have gone through treatment and they are in remission and they get cancer again, nobody is shaming them. They are bringing casseroles and loving them and saying, we got you. We want to help in every way. And that doesn't happen with relapsing and addictions. It's really like shunned, more aloneness, less connection, all the things that feed the addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it. Is that more disconnection, more anxiety, more using whatever the person's using to try and regulate themselves. So that whole co-regulation factor, right? That couples co-regulate each other.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I don't think we've had that on our show, and I think it's really important.
Okay. So when there's disconnection, there's anxiety, right? Whenever there's disconnection, there's anxiety. And then that's where trying to regulate that anxiety is where people get into trouble with mood altering stuff. But couples actually co-regulate each other. So polyvagal theory right now is becoming a very big thing. You and I can actually regulate each other's anxiety by being in connection with one another.
Absolutely.
And I know this from my husband, who was in ICU a number of years ago and was in an induced coma for over a week, which was a very unusual and horrible experience for him and for me. And I would be watching his vital signs, right? And I have a nursing background, so I know a little bit about what's going on there. And I'd be going like, and I would just start rubbing his feet and talking to him and rubbing his head. He loves to be touched and have his feet rub his back. And I could watch his vital signs, his anxiety level coming down, even though he couldn't talk to me, right? He could hear me. And so couples we regulate each other. So I think, one of the things in Imago is we are wired in our brain to connect. It's our human condition. We want to connect with each other. And when we're not connected, we're anxious.
Yes.
And then the solution to that is connection.
Yes.
So trying to maintain the connection or regain the connection. Another way of looking at it too is we're wired to connect. We're wired to protect. Right?
I've never heard that before. I like it.
Oh, you like it?
I do.
We're wired to connect. We're wired to protect.
I really like that. Yeah, and then that protection looks like defensiveness and anger and all kinds of things. When we're trying to protect ourselves from the hurt, we do all kinds of things to further the disconnection.
No, doesn't make sense, does it? But that is what we...
It is what we do until we can get really more conscious and intentional about really like, what do I want and how do I get that? I ask in my office quite a bit, well, is that effective?
This working?
Yeah. If it's effective, then I really am no one to tell you to stop it. But if it's ineffective, let's find something different to try. Let's experiment with something new. And yeah, that protection part really doesn't show our best, highest selves.
No, for sure. It really doesn't, Yeah, it really doesn't. Yeah.
You mentioned Gabor Maté.
He's written several books, but his most famous book on addiction is In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts.
Book.
Where, he is a true Canadian hero. I mean, he took a lot of flack because he started safe injection sites in Vancouver. And I don't know if you know, but Vancouver has the worst drug problem in all of Canada. When you drive down one of the main streets in Vancouver and you see blocks and blocks and blocks of people injecting, hundreds of them. His idea was, let's protect them. Let's bring them in. Let's treat them with compassion. Let's have safe injection sites where we can monitor what they're doing. And there have been less deaths that way, right? He took a lot of flack for that. But what he has is compassion, that we need to have compassion. It's like, I love your analogy of the person with cancer. We don't shame somebody because they have a remission. And frankly, Tom and Ann Martin, who are Imago therapists and workshop presenters, I quote them a lot, which is they say that all relapses are relationally based.
Interesting.
So if things are not going well at home, and so when people have a relapse, I'll say, well, what's going on? And you find the disconnection is there, right? And so Imago is about connecting people in the space between, creating safety and vulnerability and connection so that both people can be seen, heard, and valued, right?
Yeah. So you're making me think we have to get a workshop online for recovering couples.
It would be a good thing to do.
I don't know if anybody's doing that right now, are they?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
Well, Maureen, I am so grateful for the time you gave our listeners today. There's so many intimate conversations that are hard to have. And I hope that listening to our conversation will help someone today think about recovery differently, thinking about helping someone in their life that is addicted or struggling in any way to maybe look at this with a different lens. The word compassion is such an appropriate word for understanding, like if you could think like for a moment they have cancer and it shifts the heart to a different place, right?
They're not doing this on purpose, right? And they need help. They need love and understanding. And they need edges at times like I had with my son.
Well, is there anything you want to close with that we haven't said today, Maureen? Because I've loved our time together.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think just keep trying. If you have a loved one that's in trouble, keep trying. Let them know that they're loved, even though they're using. Let them know that you're not going to put up with inappropriate behavior, but you still love them. Keep trying.
Keep trying, persevere. And there are blessings in our lives that happen when we do that.
Somebody said to me recently, your son is a joy to be around. And it's true. He is. And it's possible for people to get better.
Yeah, it sure is. I'm living proof.
You're living proof. You are indeed.
Well, I'm lucky to have my Imago community and my dear, sweet husband and my children and now grandchildren. Beautiful, big life. Well, thank you everyone for listening today. This was the Relationship Blueprint. Unlock your power of connection. And today, when we think about connection, think about this whole recovery thing, staying connected and setting boundaries, just using your power. Because once you have knowledge, you can actually feel more power to connect in a way that maybe you didn't before. So thanks again, Maureen, and maybe you'll come back.
I will for sure.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for having me. Bye for now. Bye.